So, how
So
are
we
you?
were, I'm doing well. I am
That's
looking
good.
forward to a home visit coming up on Friday. I go to see my family on Friday
Wonderful.
for a week. For
Wow.
those, go ahead.
I was going to say for someone who might just be tuning in for the very first time and wondering who the heck are these people? We are Sister Elizabeth
And Sister
and
Liz.
we are Daughters of Charity, and you're listening to In the Company of Charity. And so we are in the company of each other, being charitable to each other. So now we can go on. Now that we've established who we are and for whom we speak, kind of.
And if you're new here, we do these co-host chats every now and again where there is no guest. It's a flight of ideas and fun times just with the two of us, who we happen to be good friends. So
That's right.
It makes it fun.
That's right. I would say probably the third person in the room is the Holy Spirit, because without the Holy Spirit, these would be a real disaster. I have to say, this would be really tough.
Not too far from wrapping up season 3 and going into season 4.
It's crazy. And if you're coming in for the first time, where have you been? What's happening? What's going on?
Stop listening right now and go back to the beginning when it was a hot mess.
Because we will be here when you get done. Once you catch up, it's going to be amazing. So
no, new things. I don't even know if you knew this. We're on Spotify now.
Oh, I you told me we were going to be doing that. You know me, I just stay in the background. I'm the old lady who just says, "Oh, that's wonderful, dear."
Sister dear, we are on Spotify right now as we speak.
I think that's I use Spotify. That's cool.
So if you're a Spotify listener, then I don't know what you need to do on Spotify. Do you give us a like? Do you give a review? I mean,
I don't know.
Can you take a screenshot and share this with someone? Text it to someone?
Well, the Spotify people should know what they can do. And I would say, just do it.
Just do whatever it is you do, Spotify.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Because, with each season, those of you who have been with us, we're getting so much better with each season. It's just remarkable. Leaps and bounds in improvement in all ways.
I don't know if we're less awkward this time, but we certainly have a rhythm going, I guess you could say.
We do. I think we do as well. Yeah. So you've got 3 seasons
and
3 seasons to catch up on.
The website, you can go to the website and you can see it by topic now. So you can go, and if you say, I only want to learn about the missions, or I only want to learn about prayer and spirituality, or I only want to know about, vocation related, God's will for my life kind of things. It's all there and it's done for you. You can just click into those things.
Because that is what Daughters of Charity do. They try to make ways to help people get what they need when they need it in the easiest way possible. That is what we do. And so when there doesn't seem to be a way to figure out or remember, where was that really cool podcast I heard that the daughters did? How do I find it? Now you have the way. You can do it. It's amazing. A snap. It's amazing.
We're building a library, folks. A library of audio content. That's epic.
That's crazy. It's crazy. I think when we first started this, we thought, we'll be a season or 2. Will anyone even want to talk to us? And we've certainly not had a problem getting sisters and others, especially runners. That's been a key theme.
Listen, I can't hide it.
I know you can't. No, it's fine. They're wonderful and great, amazingly wonderful people. I was going to say a little crazy, but these marathoner runners to me are just.
Listen,
that was another podcast. That was another co-host.
Sister Stephanie, who doesn't train and then just goes and runs a marathon on a treadmill. That is
just goes and runs. Yeah.
God bless her.
Yeah, runs a marathon on a treadmill.
So
you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess.
We're gonna share a little bit about today of things we're reading, because it's summertime, so people might be doing summer reading, but we have spiritual reading that we do all the time. And so we like to share those things with you today.
Yes.
Tell us, well, I don't know if you want to go first or you want me to go first.
Well, I'll go.
Okay, please.
So I I thought about this today. I thought, well, what will I say? And I tend to read on the kind of heavier side, like
So
I don't
serious.
tend to read, I don't read like murder mysteries or something like that. I was an English teacher, so I'm kind of a geek and a little bit of a purist and maybe an elitist, but all of that said and done, I am right now reading some Russian novel. I did go back to read Brothers Karamazov because I saw some Facebook thing from someone who said they were reading it. I was like, yes, that's what I need to read over the summer. Is Brothers Karamazov in Dorothy
reading.
Day spirit. That's like the light reading, that and a few poets. So I've been really, really into poetry too lately, doing some writing poetry. I haven't written in a long time. Trying to catch up on some models of storytelling and things like that, which I really, really like to do. Thinking about looking at doing some storytelling model with Louise de Marillac, because I'm doing my retreat in a couple of weeks. So that's not just what I'm reading, but that's kind of just something I do, but what I've been reading is The Interior Castle, which of course is really light and fluffy,
Another light reading. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I through the Center of Action and Contemplation right now, they're doing a course, online course, of course, with James Finley and Mirabai Starr, who are doing this thing on Teresa of Avila and the Interior Castle, and the second season of their podcast, which is Turning to the Mystics, was on Teresa. So I'm like really immersed in Teresa of Avila right now. Sometimes, she fascinates me. She's just so amazing. The things that this woman did in her life, and just the writing of the Interior Castle and the writing of her life. Just amazing, just really, really amazing. And she terrifies me because she's just, I've just been listening on the podcast to the fourth mansion, and it's kind of like she's saying, all these like serpents or reptiles or beasts that you find in the first castle, which of course are all your own demons and your own issues, they should kind of be fading away as you move through the mansions, should be kind of shedding this kind of ugliness, or not so much ugliness, but the distractions, and getting more and more into prayer. But she says, leave a couple of them there. They just kind of keep you humble, And I'm thinking, which couple should I keep? So I'm like listening to saying,
which are the acceptable demons?
Yeah, just read a John Grisham. What is wrong with you?
I feel like I'm not even near the castle. I'm like, I'm on the hill 5 miles away, being like, man, I wish I was near that castle. Like closeness to God. It is really something.
It's something.
Another
it's
level.
Something. But yeah, it is. It is. But James Finley, I don't know if anyone else listens to him, but he is just amazing. He's the most mellow kind of, and he ends all the podcasts with these 10 minutes of silence. The first time I did it, I was like, is he on? Are we? But he does prayer. He does contemplative prayer at the end, and I'm like thinking, did something happen to this? Did I miss him? What's going on?
For him, I'm sure that's the blink of an eye.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And
so
for me, 10 seconds in, I'm thinking,
yeah,
how long has it been that I've been silent? I'm like, whew, it is tough. Tough.
Yeah, that's mansion talk there. You got to get in the mansion, girl.
Trying to get in. Hello, let me in.
Trying to get in. Hello, let me in. Yeah. But it's been great because reading her and just really kind of getting into this, and getting my mind set on this idea of moving into a place of deeper prayer and deeper contemplation, and at the same time continuing to kind of do the study I need to do and the reflection for the retreat on St. Louise de Marillac that I'll be giving July 19th. It's really she's helped me. Teresa, just kind of reading about Teresa has kind of helped me to think about St. Louise as well, who was just
A
sometime we're
very
just going to have
deep
to do
thinker.
a podcast on her. I mean, I just think we have to do it. Get a few of the real gurus on St. Louise. Louise Sullivan and Father Chris, just people who just really, really. Now, I feel like I'm still just a novice in this study of her, but she's really amazing. When you really, really start reading her letters, she's just a fascinating woman. So I think reading about St. Teresa of Avila and having someone to kind of compare Louise to, not in a bad way, but in a good way, to say, well, how does she? Because they were around the same time, maybe 100 or so years difference, but yeah, Louise holds her own. She's no lightweight. This girl, St. Louise de
Yeah.
Marillac is not very well known, but she should be. And so Teresa of Avila on one side, mystic, and St. Louise de Marillac on the other. I think mystic, prophet, foundress, mother to us, sister to us, saint to the church, just amazing.
Say a word to the listeners about, because you shared this with me during my retreat, of St. Louise writing to one of the sisters who was really struggling, and she has said, like, tell me everything.
Yeah.
I forget what you said it better. You know
yeah.
which one I'm talking about.
I do. I wish if we had known, I could have pulled it out, but it's to Sister Elizabeth Martin, and she's writing to her, and apparently Sister Elizabeth Martin is struggling. And the reason I really liked it, because I'm Elizabeth, you're Elizabeth, this is Elizabeth, kind of worked for the moment. But I just was really struck by Louise's response to knowing that she was struggling emotionally, that she just didn't feel well. And she pretty much says to her, look, I get it. I get this is tough. I get that that we struggle sometimes. And, but you're not anywhere where God doesn't want you to be, and he's going to use it, and just trust. You got to be okay with this. And at the end, she says to her in this letter, which to me was just, we sometimes think of Louise as a very kind of not stern, but she was tough on the sisters in the beginning. They had the rule and she wanted them to live by it. And she was very methodical and like a businesswoman, But she just kind of in this letter turns to this sister and says, please don't hesitate ever. Write anytime. Tell me what's happening. Tell me how you're feeling. I will listen. I will read it. I will understand it. I'll be there for you. Even in the letter earlier, she says, when you're struggling, think of me whispering in your ear. Things are going to be okay. This whole letter is saying to Sister Elizabeth, hang in there. It's going to be okay. I get it. I'm with you. I understand. And at the very end, she says, I will be both your sister and your best friend. Oh,
Come on.
I mean, this is the 1600s. These young women who have joined the community are kind of a rough and tumble kind of group, and they all weren't real healthy, I mean, this is 1600s France, right? It's not the best of times in the world,
Right.
But she had an amazing and passionate love for those sisters, and so did Teresa of Avila. I mean, I think you see when you kind of look at those women who were founding these communities in that time, like the late 1500s, early 1600s, into the mid 1600s. It was just fascinating. They just defy every identity you would think of for a woman in that time.
Exactly.
They were educated, they were smart, they were savvy. They worked with priests and business people, and they spoke their mind. They were, and yet they were gentle and loving, and often just great guides for these young women who were starting and trying to live out their own vocations. Yeah. So when we think about them as foundresses, and all those kind of lofty, they're saints, and they kind of belong to the church. I think these foundresses of our communities, we have to kind of reclaim them as sister, you know,
Mm.
like these are our sisters, and how precious then they become, you know, because they were right there in the trenches with us. So yeah, so thanks for bringing that up, because it really helps me. I've got 2
Yeah.
weeks to get my retreat ready, so I know I've talked a lot about
I
Teresa
am
and Louise.
stoked. I'm
Yeah,
stoked
I'm
for you.
excited. Yeah, and well, and the others, there was some kind of something that happened in the other retreats. So, and so what would have only been 3 or 4 people is now going to be like 12. I'm like, holy cow, that's a whole different kind of retreat.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
new
so that's
information.
yeah. So I had to kind of rework it a little. It's very different giving a guided retreat to 3 or 4 sisters to now doing something more presentation like, I think, because when you're trying to deal with 10 to 12 people,
Mm.
it's going to be a little different. So reworking little, the material.
Little
That's
by
what you do.
little.
What you do.
Wow.
So tell us what you're doing.
Okay.
Maybe hopefully you're doing a John Grisham or something
No,
light and
no.
easy. No, of
Now,
course not. No.
before you laugh, before you laugh.
Yeah, I would never laugh. That's a lie.
This is
Yeah.
the book that I'm reading. I finished it the other day.
But,
It's called Falling Upward. It's by Richard Rohr. He's a
you-
priest.
We're all about the center of action and contemplation today. Everybody, don't leave us yet. They're awesome. I hope they know. Maybe
They
there's
have a
some way.
great,
There's an algorithm that they'll know we've been talking about them all night. So
yes.
go ahead. Yes.
So I have been a fan of
Well, tell us
Father
the
Richard
title
Rohr.
again.
It
Tell us
is
the title.
called Falling Upward,
Upward.
which is quite ironic if you know the book, because it's the book about what he calls the 2 halves of life.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't say I'm quite in the second half of life. I turned 39.
You're reading it for me, aren't you? Trying to understand.
I want to understand my sisters.
Oh,
No,
that's
I mean, listen, it was on the shelf. I have read many of his works before. One of which is The Immortal Diamond, which I totally recommend as a first, if you're into like psychology and human formation and that connection between, the psychology and spirituality in the Catholic tradition, the Christian like faith tradition, Judeo-Christian, if you will. That's a great place to start, because it talks about the true self and the false self kind of shift that ideally would happen as we mature in the spiritual life. And then this is very interesting. I love what he talks about in this, about the ego as he calls it a container. So the ego, that it's a healthy thing, of course. Most of the time when you talk about like, oh, that person's got a big ego, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But actually ego is a really healthy thing, because it's building your sense of right and wrong, your who am I, how do I interact with the world, what are really positive qualities about me, how do I understand myself. These are things that are built in a healthy environment as a young person, young adult, into your middle age or whatever. And then he makes the argument that the second half of life is almost like a reordering of all of that, like
I understand that.
a shedding of maybe what you identified with yourself as. Like, for example, he talks about the challenge for like professionally religious people, like ourselves, priests, sisters, brothers, because our identity is so very strong and visible. And, at least for the sisters, generally speaking, people have this idea that is mostly positive. I mean, you hear kind of stories, maybe, oh, sister so-and-so hit me with a ruler,
Right,
like all of that of
yeah.
decades ago type of stuff. But generally speaking, people have this idea of sisters, and it can become, for lack of a better word, like a persona, in a sense, versus like a taking on of, Jesus Christ and that identity, and so I think what's been really helpful is for me to think about where are these like motivations coming from,
Mhm.
what's the discernment of spirits, what's the Lord speaking to me, what is myself, like what am if there are things that I'm doing for like self-aggrandizement, or
Mhm.
for wanting to appear to be a certain way, or hiding. I think more on my side, like hiding my weaknesses. I don't want
Right.
people to think that, you know, um, that sisters have bad thoughts, or sisters don't like somebody, or, like
Right. Right.
these are
Yes.
things that it's like, oh, we can't be letting people know about that stuff.
Well, they know it.
Yeah. I mean,
But
but the thing is
yeah,
that the thing is that sometimes we are blind
right.
to the things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we have to put on sometimes I think we have to put on a persona, that's going to put the best foot forward, which I mean we should be doing, and some of it is because we represent something bigger than ourselves in some
Mm,
ways, but in the same sense we just are who we are. We're completely human. We are the same as everybody who's not living in community, right, or not in a religious community. We just live a little differently than other people, but I'm a human being. I have emotions and feelings, and I have all kinds of desires, and I have the fears, and I have likes and dislikes, just like everybody else.
mm.
So it is hard sometimes when people want you to, um, or they hope or they expect that you're going to represent something in a certain way, and you don't quite live up to the expectation. It can be hard. It can be really hard.
And I
Yeah.
think, the idea of coming from a place of wholeness and oneness, and
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
that either or and us and them. And I think in this time of history that we see very clearly that there is division among us, um,
Hmm.
in politics, in society, in um, races and cultures, in the
Hmm.
church itself. And it's kind of like, uh, you know can we recognize and celebrate differences and honor the truth that exists, and at the same time, you know know that we're all human beings and we're all messed up, and you know I don't have to be right about everything. And I think that's kind of the gift of community, when someone says, well, hey, can we do it this way? And I think, like, I guess, why not? Like, do we have
Right.
to
Right.
do it my way? Do we have to do it
Yeah.
so and so's way?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Or the way they used to do it, or the way it always was. Yeah, because it's not the way it always was. Like you say, we live in a very different world now. I mean, not
mm,
just because of pandemic, not but just decades go by, years go by, things change. The way we communicate changes, the way we operate changes, the expectations in ministry change. All of those kind of things. And if we're not healthy enough, like you say, if we're not whole enough in ourselves, to do that, and it can be scary. I would imagine that some of what you're saying sounds like, as you're developing as a human, as an adult, you're learning things about yourself. You're celebrating who you are in a lot of ways, and then kind of come to the other side where still celebrating who you are, but you may not have the capacity to live all of that anymore. You don't have the energy to do all the things you used to do, or there may be ways in which the second half of your life challenges the first half, and to say what
mm,
is still there. How do I adapt it to this new reality of who I am on this side, and not that there's a fine line, but someone would say, well, you're in middle life, and I think 60, that's not middle. I don't have another 60 years. I hope God I don't have another 60. So you do
mhm.
start thinking, like, gosh, it took me 60 years to get to this point. where I feel like I am my truest self, right? And now what do I do with it? Where do I go with this? And how long am I going to have to do it? And at the same time, your body starts saying, "Hey, my gosh, we've been at this for 60 years. Can we take a break?"
And
Yeah.
maybe you could speak to this a little better. There was a time in my spiritual life where I had some very, very powerful experiences of God,
Mm-hmm.
where there was no doubt in my mind that the Lord was present, that he lives in me, that he is walking with me and all of that
Mm,
in the Spirit of God, and I think there were times where I thought like, well, how could it possibly get any better than this?
mm,
Like I can't imagine being closer to God than I am right now. And and as things have progressed, it's really quite astonishing how God can continue to surprise us
mm,
and deepen us and just invite us to stretch in ways that we could have never imagined. And I think we all signed up for a life following God and faithfulness, and I think that means that the joys are deeper and the sufferings are deeper,
mm,
and that's something that that Father Richard Rohr has often mentioned, is that the path to holiness is often through either great love or great suffering, or
mhm.
both. Um, and
Yeah.
so I just it's a paradox, and I think the invitation is to how to hold both of those things. That as soon as God is stretching us and opening us up, that all of the things of life become more real and tangible, I guess you could say.
Mhm. It's kind of, yeah, and actually, Teresa Vavel kind of talks about this, and it's just kind of reflecting on the idea that when you come to prayer, when you really start kind of looking at yourself and inviting God, there's a point at which in our prayer life, in our contemplation, in our time of prayer, we invite God into the conversation that we're kind of having with ourselves, right? We're having this and we're saying, "Oh God, help me in this." And so we're always kind of inviting God in to the space, right? And so God comes in as much as he can or she can, and that space, I'm allowing it to open to let God in, and maybe I'm a little scared sometimes because God can be overwhelming, and so I may kind of say, "Okay, that's good, 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 good."
That's enough. We're
Like,
good.
that's enough. That's enough. But she talks about how as you move through the mansions, that as you enter into contemplative prayer, and I think you're kind of talking about this, you kind of get to a point where you've recognized how impactful, how amazing, how wonderful God is. And what she says is that there's a point at which you're no longer kind of letting God in, like you have the control, but God, you kind of letting God take over the controls, right? And so God doesn't overwhelm you and leave you in your littleness, right? And instead, what God does is, as you were saying, expands. God just continues to make the container of his love bigger to allow for himself,
Mm.
That's, to me, blows my mind, right? I'm thinking, okay, I think I get that, and that even scares me a little bit more. I said, I think I've had a moment where I have felt the enormity of God's love, not overwhelm me to the point where it scared me, but in a way that opened my heart, opened my soul, opened my being to love in a way I never would have imagined. Being able to love, to see in the poor the face of Christ, to see in my sisters, Christ at work in them, and to just feel its goodness, even in the midst of the suffering of poverty, even in, there's just so many ways of trying to find that it's not a dichotomy, it's the balance of seeing immense beauty, love, compassion, mercy in the face of suffering, It's really hard to say, I see beauty, in this person who's suffering,
Mm.
right? How is that possible to see beauty there? Well, because you know that God is present there. He has to be, or we'd all just disintegrate. If God wasn't here, we would not be here. God has to be here. God is present. If God turned his back on us, if God turned away, our seats would be empty. We'd be gone. We just don't
It's
exist
over,
without him.
right? It's over.
So yeah, and so just and realizing, seeing even this person who's suffering is suffering in the love and mercy of God. How I don't even know how to understand that, but I recognize that we become vehicles of his love in our compassion and our love for the other. The idea we're his hands, his eyes, his feet. I mean, that can become kind of a cliche, but when you're holding someone who is fearful, suffering, crying, facing death, if God were not present, this would be devastating to all of us. We would not survive this. We would just disintegrate in the midst of this. And yet somehow God allows that suffering to shape us. He just expands and helps us to open. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
why we do what we do. It's why we're here, I guess. I don't know.
And that's why I think apostolic reflection is such a key practice, and that's, for if you're new, like that's a hallmark of our spirituality, is one of the things that makes the Daughters of Charity and other Vincentian family members, unique, is that we spend some time delving into how is God present in our ministries and the people that we're serving, and I've often been drawn to that idea of putting on the mind of Christ, or seeing with the eyes of Christ, and I think it's really tough sometimes to do that in the moment, and I think that's why we have that time, the end of the day or with each other, to say, like, this is what happened, and this is kind of what, in reflection, what I feel like God was doing, or how the Spirit was moving. But those moments where it's really a grace, right, where you're in the moment with that person, and you see, like, yeah, God is here.
Yeah. It's
This
almost a feeling like you can almost feel like God's kind of moving you
like,
over a little bit. It's like, just step aside, Elizabeth. I'm just going to do my thing, and you realize, like, okay, I'm in this moment, which I've read about, which I've heard about, and I never thought, I'm not reflective enough, or I don't pray hard enough to have this moment. You realize it doesn't really matter, because when God needs to be in the moment, nothing you do, your littleness, your inability to even understand it, is not going to stand in the way of God. When that presence needs to be known, and it's a weird feeling, to have that sense that you're literally just being kind of asked to step over a little bit, let God through, and you realize, I'm being used by God in this moment to be for this person in a way I have no idea how to do this, but I have to let myself be the vehicle through which God's grace and mercy can flow. And there's nothing extraordinary and like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. It can be scary. It's incredibly humbling. And it's not something you walk around with 24/7. When it happens, and then it goes away. Like,
yeah,
well, that was great, but it's
happening all the time, and yet there's these moments
exactly
where we can just actually, like, tap into that
exactly.
energy
Yeah.
and feel it.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's that we know those moments because we have great thinkers and those who can articulate this and for us and help us, people like Richard Rohr, people like James Finley, people like Bishop Barron, others who are writing about the spiritual life about the way God works in our lives. We can go back and look at the saints, read the writings of Teresa of Avila, of Julian of Norwich, of Hildegard of Bingen, listen to her music. I mean, the stuff is just blows your mind. It's so incredibly beautiful. And you may not understand a word of what she's saying, but this had to have come. This is God music. There's no other way that this could exist. And that these people have opened themselves up to be vehicles through which God shares God's wisdom and love, right? And we can tap into it because it's here for us. God hasn't left us without this, and it's all around us.
I love it. It's like the fish being like, where's the ocean?
Where's the water? Yeah, exactly.
You're in it, pal.
Exactly.
You're in it.
You're in it. Yeah. And it is helping you survive. It is how you are surviving, and it's all around you, and it makes you the fish you are. That's it's so cool. So I'm glad we're I'm sure there are other really nice beach reads we could have been talking about. But we are who we are. It's the way it is.
We're church girls, can't help it.
We just got to say, tonight's been a center of action contemplation. It's been a little of a mystical night tonight. Taking us into there.
I would say, for anyone who's listening, if you have not had that experience or an experience of God moving in a powerful way, the Spirit of God coming over you, the God energy between you and another person, I'm telling you, you just ask for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It will come.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of it. Be open to it. Don't think you're not worthy. That's the other thing. You can read some of the saints, and back certainly in the 1600s, they would talk about themselves as being unworthy, being worms, all this kind of degrading talk, and we don't like it. We think, oh, I don't want to call myself a worm. I'm not a worm. But it's not about being a worm. It's about it's about language being unable to really express, what they're trying to say, which is there's nothing I have done to earn or deserve that experience of God, that knowledge of God, that openness of God. There's nothing I have done that or could possibly do that makes me worthy somehow or deserving. God gives it because God freely gives it, and I am loved. We are loved by God in His generous love, and that is it. You are just loved by God, and when we open ourselves up to that, He will very gently, like Mary, right? Like the Blessed Mother. I mean, choosing her and filling her with the Holy Spirit and His Son, and just the whole experience that Mary went through is such a perfect example of how God can just overshadow us with His love, and we are then able to give give life to something really precious, which is a sign of His love. In whatever way that happens for us. Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Pretty amazing. Praise the Lord is right.
Jesus is good. Jesus is
the best. Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't done any reading on St. Louise de Marillac, even just do some quotes of St. Louise, Google something about her, you'll get some things about her. I think she's going to be my mission for the next year. I think her story, who she was as a woman, in the church at the time, as a mother, as as a sister, as a foundress of a community, as a woman who answered the call of God's desire for her to be this person who changed religious life at a time when no one needed it to change. No one was thinking, oh, we really need to change religious life. She said, well, it wasn't. Contemplative life, cloistered life for women wasn't necessarily in question in 1633. But here she comes on the stage with some radical ideas, and yet she just does them very simply.
It's awesome.
So Yeah.
excited. I'm excited for your
I'm
retreat and to
excited.
see how it goes. And,
Yeah,
you
me
know,
too. Me too.
for all of you listening, we appreciate you. We never take you for granted, and don't hesitate to communicate with us. Send us your ideas and questions. And, if you like this co-host chat, you found something beautiful in it, take a screenshot, send the link to your friends. And there is someone out here, I'm sure, who was blessed by this conversation. And
I think so.
I was certainly blessed. So
yeah, so was I, sister. So at least we know that, right?
check that out.
Check it out. Check it out.
All
And
right,
we'll be
guys.
back with more interviews. So season's not over yet. Not over yet.
Still got a few weeks.
We got a little bit left in us. So hang on. This ride's not over yet.
We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye now.